Police launched an internal affairs investigation after a traffic stop involving Omaha native Terence "Bud" Crawford.
Celebrated hometown boxing champ Bud Crawford's accomplishments with a parade. He's pulled over by Omaha police, setting off a social media firestorm.
Seatbelt.
Please don't step out.
Opening the door. You can take I'm mine opening the off door. me right here on my right. I'm keeping my fucking hands up. I'm not reaching for no gun, bro.
Step out.
Can I move my?
Step out.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Terence "Bud" Crawford was ordered out of his car at gunpoint by Omaha police just hours after thousands of fans filled the streets to celebrate his historic victory over Canelo Alvarez. Think about that for a moment. Earlier that day, Crawford was the pride of Omaha, waving to cheering crowds from a parade float while fans celebrated him as the city's greatest boxing champion. Just a few hours later, he was standing on the side of the road in handcuffs, surrounded by flashing police lights. How did a day filled with celebration turn into a night of confusion and controversy? This is the unbelievable story of how one of boxing's greatest champions went from a victory parade to a high-profile police stop in a matter of hours. For the people of Omaha, September 27th was meant to be a day they would never forget. Only 2 weeks earlier, Crawford had secured the biggest victory of his career by defeating Canelo Alvarez in a fight that shocked the boxing world. With that win, he became the first male boxer to unify titles in 3 different weight divisions while extending his undefeated record to 42-0 with 31 knockout victories. The city celebrated him. Supporters packed the streets, waving banners, chanting his name, and celebrating the hometown hero. Children sat on their parents' shoulders just like a true legend. A massive parade rolled through downtown Omaha as thousands of supporters packed the streets, waving banners, chanting his name, and celebrating the hometown hero. Children sat on their parents' shoulders just to catch a glimpse of the champion, while local officials praised Crawford as a symbol of determination, resilience, and hometown pride. But the celebration didn't end with the parade. As night fell, Crawford attended a private birthday celebration surrounded by family, close friends, and loyal supporters. The atmosphere remained electric, and by every account, it was the perfect ending to one of the greatest days of his career. However, no one could have imagined what would happen next. As Crawford left the celebration and headed home, everything changed within minutes. At around 1:30 a.m., Omaha police officers on patrol noticed a vehicle driving recklessly through downtown. Officers initiated a traffic stop, expecting a routine encounter. Instead, the situation escalated almost immediately. While approaching the vehicle, officers spotted a firearm lying in plain view on the driver's side floorboard. The discovery instantly raised the level of concern. Their commands became louder and more urgent as they ordered everyone inside the vehicle to exit one at a time. One of the passengers recorded the entire encounter on video. The footage, which quickly spread across social media, captured an astonishing contrast. Earlier that day, Crawford had been celebrated as Omaha's greatest sports hero. Now he was being instructed to slowly unbuckle his seatbelt, step out of the vehicle, and keep his hands visible at all times. Crawford fully cooperated with every command. He was handcuffed and stood quietly under the bright police lights while officers secured the scene. Moments later, officers confirmed the driver's identity. It was Terence "Bud" Crawford. Police issued him a citation for reckless driving. No one inside the vehicle was arrested, and officers confirmed that both Crawford and his passengers were legally permitted to possess the firearms found during the stop. Even so, the images were impossible to ignore. One of the world's greatest undefeated boxing champions had gone from being celebrated by thousands of fans to standing in handcuffs during a police investigation, all within the same day. By sunrise, videos of the incident had spread across social media, triggering widespread debate. Some questioned whether officers had used excessive force during what began as a routine traffic stop. Others criticized Crawford for allegedly driving recklessly only hours after receiving a hero's welcome from his city. Back in 2016, Terence "Bud" Crawford found himself making headlines for reasons that had nothing to do with boxing. A heated dispute at an Omaha auto body shop quickly escalated into a criminal case after a disagreement over a custom paint job turned confrontational. According to the shop owner, Crawford decided to take matters into his own hands instead of resolving the dispute through legal channels. Surveillance footage allegedly showed Crawford and several others lowering his vehicle from a hydraulic lift and driving away before paying the remaining balance. The situation became even more serious when the hydraulic lift was damaged during the process. Prosecutors estimated the cost of the damage at more than $3,000, turning what began as a business disagreement into a criminal investigation. The court ultimately convicted Crawford of disorderly conduct and property damage, sentencing him to 90 days in jail along with 2 years of probation. For an undefeated world champion at the peak of his career, the ruling came as a major shock. His attorney strongly criticized the sentence, arguing that it was far too severe for someone with no significant criminal history. Less than a year later, a district judge agreed that the punishment had been excessive and overturned the jail sentence. Even so, the case served as a reminder that, despite his fame and success, Crawford was still subject to the same legal system as everyone else. Just a year later, another incident placed his name back in the headlines. In 2017, Crawford was briefly detained following a disturbance outside a clothing store in Omaha. Witnesses described a chaotic scene involving several individuals. When officers stopped Crawford's vehicle, they discovered a legally registered firearm belonging to him. Although no criminal charges were filed, the incident generated another wave of media attention. The growing narrative suggested that controversy seemed to follow Crawford outside the boxing ring, even when he was never convicted of a serious offense. But Crawford's challenges weren't limited to encounters with law enforcement. Some of the biggest battles of his career took place behind closed doors within the boxing business itself. For years, Crawford fought under legendary promoter Bob Arum and Top Rank Boxing. At first, the partnership appeared to be a perfect match. Top Rank helped transform Crawford into one of the biggest names in boxing, but behind the scenes, frustration continued to grow. Crawford believed he was repeatedly denied the biggest fights of his career, particularly the long-awaited showdown with Errol Spence Jr. that fans had demanded for years. Eventually, those frustrations exploded into a high-profile lawsuit. Crawford accused Bob Arum of breaching contractual obligations and engaging in racial discrimination that negatively affected his career. The lawsuit claimed that Arum had a history of making negative remarks about black fighters while limiting Crawford's biggest opportunities in the sport. According to Crawford, those decisions cost him millions of dollars in lost earnings and delayed several career-defining fights. He sought $5.4 million in damages. Arum, who was 90 years old at the time, strongly denied every allegation. He described the lawsuit as completely baseless and argued that his decades-long career promoting fighters from every background spoke for itself. In his view, the legal action was nothing more than an attempt to obtain money through false accusations. For Crawford, however, the lawsuit represented something much bigger than financial compensation. He insisted it was about respect, fairness, and receiving the opportunities his accomplishments had earned. Crawford maintained that, despite becoming one of boxing's greatest champions, he was forced to fight against politics, favoritism, and business interests outside the ring just as often as he fought opponents inside it. Regardless of the controversy, one fact remains impossible to ignore. Terence Crawford's achievements inside the ring are among the greatest in modern boxing history. With an undefeated record of 42 victories, 0 defeats, and 31 knockouts, he has built a resume that very few fighters can match. His combination of elite skill, patience, intelligence, and devastating power has allowed him to dominate world-class opponents throughout his career. His victory over Canelo Alvarez elevated his legacy even further, making him the first male boxer in history to unify world titles in 3 separate weight divisions. It was a performance that redefined greatness and cemented his place among boxing's all-time elite. Many analysts now consider Crawford the pound-for-pound king and one of the most complete fighters of his generation. Yet history has shown that a champion's legacy is shaped by more than victories alone. For Crawford, two very different images continue to exist. One is the disciplined, undefeated champion who conquered every challenge inside the ring through hard work, dedication, and extraordinary talent. The other is a public figure whose career has occasionally been overshadowed by lawsuits, legal disputes, and controversial encounters with law enforcement. That contrast is what makes his story so fascinating. Will history remember Terence Crawford solely for his unmatched accomplishments inside the ring, or will the controversies outside of boxing become an unforgettable part of his legacy? Perhaps that's the bigger question facing not only Crawford, but many elite athletes. Why do so many champions find themselves fighting battles long after the final bell rings? Some believe the pressure of fame plays a major role. Every decision is analyzed, every mistake becomes headline news, and every controversy spreads across social media within minutes. Others point to the people surrounding successful athletes, friends, advisors, and members of their inner circle, who sometimes encourage poor decisions instead of protecting a champion's reputation. Money and fame can also create challenges that few people truly understand. The greater the success, the greater the pressure, temptation, and public scrutiny. For Crawford, this latest police stop arrived at what should have been the highest point of his career. Instead of celebrating his historic victory, signing endorsement deals, and preparing for future blockbuster fights, he found himself at the center of another public controversy. Will the incident affect future sponsorships? Could promoters become more cautious about future megafights? Or will fans simply view this as another obstacle overcome by a champion who has repeatedly proven his ability to fight back? One thing is certain. Terence Crawford's journey is no longer defined solely by what happens inside the boxing ring. His reputation, public image, and long-term legacy are now being shaped just as much by the events that unfold outside of it. Only time will answer the question every boxing fan is asking. Will Terence "Bud" Crawford be remembered as one of the greatest undefeated champions in boxing history, or as a legendary fighter whose greatest challenges came outside the ropes? If you enjoyed this breakdown,